You're tuned to the Wizard WZRD Chicago, 88.3 FM, WZRDchicago.org, wherever the interwebs are received. And guess what? NIK BARTSCH is here, and he's going to be in town tonight at Constellation. And that show begins at 8:30. I'm hoping tickets are left. You should check it out. But we're going to talk with Nick, and let's see if I've got these mics working properly.
Yeah. Hello, Brian. Great pleasure to be at the show. Looking very much forward to talk a bit and show some music.
Awesome. Working out perfect. So let's start with this. When I interviewed you a couple weeks ago, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is books that you're reading that inspire you. I love to promote reading.
Right.
Anything, even if it's something you read 20 years ago that you think is important.
Well, I'm reading actually a lot. You know, I'm actually reading more than I watch films or stuff. It inspires me a lot also. Just the action also of reading and having the fantasy, you know, developing out of your mind. So recently I read actually a lot of books that are more historical or philosophical. And a series of books I read by an ape scientist actually called Frans de Waal. He works in the US. I think he wrote a lot of books about apes and their behavior in relation to our behavior. So one of the major things is that he emphasizes cooperation, you know, as a very important strategy in evolution. So one of his major books that have this topic is called The Age of Empathy. And I think that's for us in general in society important and interesting, but also very personally for my music, for the way how we work, you know, the idea of cooperation and the idea of working together as a team organism inspires me a lot. So these books help me a lot, actually coming from more natural science corner than from a philosophical corner to show what actually made us so cooperative through evolution, through thousands of years. We very often emphasize egoism as a gene that helps us to survive, but cooperation and working together and empathy are as important. That's one of his major ideas, and it's very, very interesting.
When did empathy become part of our thing? Was it there from the according to the book?
Yeah, that was very, very early, because mammals, you know, they need to somehow have empathy to understand how to deal with their children, and that's a very basic strategy. So it was all over the place, which means actually we don't have to learn it against egoism, but it's in there. You know, we do it every day. That you take a taxi and you trust the guy, that's basic. Nobody actually has attention on that, but it's much more important than the whole fighting and competition thing, or at least it's in a balance, which, all these things are important. But when we emphasize constantly only egoism and competition, it's just not true, and it's wrong in terms of evolution, science of evolution. That was very inspiring. The books are also funny, and there are a lot of examples, even from animals that have empathy with so-called no reason. You know, there is no reason that they have to do it; they just do it.
It's something we need now. That sounds like a book you should all check out.
Exactly.
What are some of the first books that changed your life?
Well, my mother actually read to me the books that changed my life very early. So when I was a kid, you know, she was kind of not so much into religion, because she came out of a traditional house where we had a Protestant religion in Switzerland, in Europe. So in the times like 60s, 70s, where I was born, 71, some of these more urban, progressive people, they somehow tried to avoid religion in education. But on the other hand, she was very spiritual. So she read a lot of books to me, and the first book I remember were actually the Greek myth. So instead of the Bible, she read the Greek myth to me, and they are sometimes quite bloody and kind of also challenging maybe for a child. But I enjoyed that very much and had all that stuff, very early in my cosmos of heroes, stories, and all that stuff. So I guess that the direction of my life already began there.
Any Alan Watts or?
Yeah, Alan Watts. I also read a lot in that phase when I was a teenager and had more attention then to Zen and Taoism. And there are I think I don't know the title in English. I read it in German, but it's something like The Stream of Water that I read. Inspired me a lot. Also with a lot of books by Deshimaru and also Suzuki, the Zen guy that was in California, I guess. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, very important book for me too. But also the martial arts books by Deshimaru, who is a Zen master that was in Europe a lot and also doing martial arts like Aikido, who brought a lot of ideas of non-violent, peaceful way of being a warrior. So that inspired me a lot.
You study martial arts. What do you study?
Yeah, I study Aikido since about like 17 years or so. My wife is an Aikido teacher. I came to the dojo actually as a greenhorn when she already was quite far, and that's how also we got to know each other.
I was just going to say, I love romantic stories. Is that how you two met?
In the beginning, actually, she didn't pay attention to me because I was really a beginner and she was already a black belt. But we trained together, and after a while I asked her if she would like to go to a movie together. So we saw...
What movie?
We saw a movie by Takeshi Kitano, like I think it was Brothers, quite a tough Japanese movie, about some gang fights, but in the way that inspired us a lot that, it's not a constant shooting, it's a lot of emptiness and nothing happens and suddenly something happens out of the blue. So these ways of dramaturgies that also inspired me a lot by Japanese music were in there too.
Cool. Let me remind you that you're listening to WZRD Chicago. We're talking with Nik Baertsch, who's in town tonight at Constellation. Can't really mention prices, but believe me, it's affordable. Starts at 8:30. Come on by. I take it she liked the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
good.
liked it both. Yeah.
All right. Very good. How long have you guys been together, man?
That was like in about 2001. So, and we married then later. We were together in Japan also, and then we married in 2005.
Wow, you've been together about as long as Laura and I have.
Okay.
It's like romance this century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
All right, listen, I've got a buddy. His name is Ross Feller. He's a composer and saxophonist. And he, I let him know that I was going to be interviewing you today. He had a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Ask Nik what he has against solos, independent lines. You do have independent lines. Fragmentation and grooves that are constructed out of these materials. So this is for you, Ross.
Right. These are a lot of questions.
Yeah,
that's
a lot of
actually.
questions.
So let's start from the top.
All right,
so,
what about solos?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not so much the against type of person, so I have nothing against, solos in specific. But the point is actually that we do not have so many traditional jazz solos, although our music is considered as jazz, but solos are very inspiring, and we love the history of jazz, and especially the consciousness in jazz for freely treatment of material that you have. So that's we have a big respect from them. When I say we, I mean the whole band that is working together in that concept. But there are even some kind of more obvious solos in a traditional sense also in our records or in the live concert. But in general, we are working on that idea of a groove organism, of the band as an organism. And there we are working on strategies that actually work with that consciousness for freedom of material, but in a very different way to also develop that. For example, one player can act more like an animal that is hiding in its surroundings. So sometimes when it moves, you see it. When it doesn't, you don't see it. So this idea of being part of the picture and part of the landscape of the musical is very important. Another idea of soloing, of freely treating material, is the whole ghost note level. Like we start to work with ghost notes a lot that inspire each other, and we are building up in a piece a certain, called ghost note net, so that ghost notes start to really develop the piece in a way. Or we work with so-called pickup dramaturgies, like drummers and we all as percussionists on our instruments, we're building up certain waves of pickups over a piece. And we want that you hear that, and we want to emphasize this, which means there should not be too many obvious like theme melodies and not too many obvious solos, because this distracts simply from that. So the decision is not ideology, but it's simply a strategy, to work different with solos and freedom in music. But I'm a total admirer of also solo techniques from all the great players, and I think also in education actually to learn to solo, to improvise is one of the most important techniques. And for us in the band, the triangle of composition, interpretation and improvisation is essential, and it's all nourished by the same musical source.
Right, that's the impression I've got. It's not against something, it's
right
for something
exactly,
else.
Yeah. You have to decide. You cannot do everything, everything has consequences. And our way of playing, especially in Ronin, has a certain aspect, a certain idea. And when I'm for example playing solo alone on the piano, I very often go wherever I want. So it's not solo in a traditional sense, but it works with the material very freely. Right.
Do you completely for our listeners, we almost set up a in-studio live thing. Didn't quite work out this time. You guys are going to be back in the spring, maybe?
I guess so, yeah. We are working on it. We are at the Big Ears Festival in spring, so we build something around, probably.
Oh, I think Ross is listening. Hey, Ross. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, Ross.
Hello.
Pleasure to indirectly meet you.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy, a real wonderful composer. And he asked a little bit about... Now, he asked about independent lines. Now, there are...
Yeah, well... also there are many composition strategies, and each one of them has certain consequences. So what I work with is a lot of polymetric, polyphonic lines, polyrhythmic lines, and this creates a certain interlocking way of development in a piece. So I try really to focus on that, like every composer does, that the major idea is creating a coherent sensual piece, right? So I'm also there not against independent lines. It depends just in the composition what you want as a result, and in that way of polymetric, polyphonic or cyclic work, it's very essential to reduce the material that it gets clear.
We got a phone call coming in. Hold on just 1 second, listeners. Let's see if we can take this. This is WZRD. Are they doing a live performance today or something? Okay, that must be at 3 o'clock. Yeah, go ahead, send them down. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Bye. Okay, sorry, listeners. I think we've got a live performance coming up at 3 o'clock. I'm not sure who it's with, but I'm always the last to know. In your solo things, do you completely improvise, or do you do any of the modules and then take off from there?
Yeah, well, my way of working has a specific reason. I was playing a lot of jazz, groove music, Brazilian music, also a lot of Latin music in general, before I discovered Gershwin and Bartók and went into more classical music, and then I studied classical music. So I was very early on improvising and playing boogie woogie, and also encouraged from my teacher to invent things myself. So when I was in the jazz scene, became a teenager, played a lot already. There I experienced a lot of freedom in music, but on the other hand also sometimes the freedom very early erased. So the respect from the piece, actually from the piece that was also written by great composers like Gershwin or Thelonious Monk or whatever, quickly developed into an own interpretation of that. And then on the other hand, later when I studied classical music, the interpretation skills, like really staying on the material, nothing changed, was very strong. I always wanted, for example, to prolong some parts in Beethoven sonatas that I liked or thought it might be interesting. So, and this was kind of, it was a holy cow. So it was not cool to do that. It was even forbidden somehow.
Yeah.
So I was looking actually for a strategy that respected the coherence of the material, the piece, but on the other hand gave us more possibilities to work freely with it, with the consciousness of jazz and improvisation. And that's why I came to this modular idea. So usually when I compose a module and it has a number, then it has a certain coherence. It works as a composition, a little interlocking, a cycle, or a harmonic development, or a rhythmic development. But then with the different groups we can work on that, and when I play, for example, alone, then I can go wherever I want. I can develop the piece even in the moment. I can kind of combine it with another one, or I can just improvise in a very traditional sense over certain patterns and develop them. So it's very open, but it is also full with respect for the material and this kind of idea of reduction. Because, as a creative person, you have always too many ideas, right? You have too many ideas. And I think the high art of doing, creating in general as a creative person is to create something coherent with reduction of the material that creates a lot of opportunities out of the material. And that's the beautiful thing, that all these patterns, all these melodies, all these structures are kind of beings. They have their own life, they have their own spin, they have their own possibilities, and my job is to listen to that and give them a presence. So that's a bit the strategy I'm interested in, which does not mean I'm against others. I think there's no truth luckily in art, but there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of possibilities, and I would like to focus on the ones that really challenge me by observing the material and working with it.
Well, you and I talked about that a little bit, the idea of and trying to find an original voice.
Right.
Many times one decides, well, I'm not going to go there, and I'm not going to go there, and it's a very admirable path, because I'm sure it's very tempting sometimes. But to finish up what Dr. Feller was asking about fragmentation and grooves that are constructed out of these materials.
Right. Well, fragmentation, I understand that, like that he maybe thinks that the piece can also, develop in a very different direction than being based on repetition and stuff like that. So that's in a way true, that in the specifically in my work with my bands, I'm usually going for repetitive moments and cycles, and I do not deconstruct the grooves and patterns, but I let them flow in a way and give them a clear spin into a certain direction. But I also wrote kind of more, let's call it spiritual, abstract new music works, and there things like that have more space, also like more in the direction of like Morton Feldman composes in my own language, but in a way that is also presented to listeners that are more used to new music, because you also have to decide for like where do I present something. Like actually Beethoven also did, to just give a huge example, I mean from a famous composer that wrote also symphonies for like the big halls, but also string quartets for a really special audience.
Chamber,
so you have to also decide where you write from him, for whom. Like in my case, these works are not so known, but I also work with material more abstract in a certain way. And the grooves, there is a specific reason why I don't develop grooves, in a too quick way. Because when a drummer is playing something and it really needs to groove, it's difficult when it changes too quickly into different things. So my strategy is more to change grooves or to overlap them, or for example when we have a piece like Module 3817 on Stoa, you can hear 2 different or 3 different drum beats connected to the different patterns, which is for the drummer actually quite challenging. It's also rhythmically challenging, but you don't hear it so much because it just flows and grooves. But when you analyze it, you can analyze it like a modern composition that works with a lot of complex relations, right? but to deconstruct the groove or to quickly develop it, that the drummer has to read or learn it by heart, like you learn a composition by Anton Webern or something, just doesn't allow me on stage to bring that sensuality directly and hit the people, without getting too complicated. The music is complex but not complicated. And I know that stuff because I learned by heart a lot of abstract music when I played classical music. So I learned, for example, Webern's piano pieces by heart and, played them a lot. So I know what it means. It's possible, but it needs a lot of learning. And then the flow, the thing that in groove music is so important, that you have a certain flow, it's difficult to get like this.
Yeah. Well, this is not an original thought. A lot of musicians have said this, but I'm so glad there is a good amount of improv in your music because, and especially right now in this country, the group kind of symbolizes, and again, these aren't my ideas.
Yeah.
The group symbolizes society, and the improvisational aspect shows that I can be me no matter what in the society. I can work within the structure, but still be an individual.
Right.
And I think that's very important in the music.
Right. To not make it complicated, like Stravinsky said this very clear. So, self-chosen structure opens a lot of freedom. So the problem is actually not the freedom itself, but that when there is only freedom and you can go wherever you want, the creativity is too big. So let's focus on something, and as long as it is self-chosen and it works in the community and every individual voice is heard when we work together, and that's the way we work together in our groups, then you create actually a lot of beautiful moments in the structure you have chosen, and that's not possible differently. It's not rigorous. It's just a strategy to find beautiful blossoms out of that material. Like you find creatures in the deep sea these days, where they're all there, and every day they discover new creatures. They're all in the structure, but we have to focus on where to look at them.
Well, even to take it further, when you find a structure that you want to work with, it's like going into the deep, finding it in its own habitat.
Yeah,
when you create a structure, it's its own world, like you say, they're beings.
Right. That's why I have chosen the title Lyria for the third studio album of Ronin, because Lyria is such a deep sea creature, and I saw that in a book by my wife. Is a doctor of biology, so she has a lot of books about these different animals, and one was about the deep sea creatures, and one of these animals was very beautiful when I saw it, and the name was Lyria. So I thought that's a brilliant name for these kind of animals, where they did not know, the scientists, what does it eat, how does it develop, what is it exactly? And then actually I wrote this guy who discovered that animal at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, in California. And he said, I can use that title as a record, that's okay. And I asked him, where the hell did you have this name from, this beautiful name? And then he said, I think I have it from a fantasy book somewhere. And, as long as we don't know what this animal is, we don't give it a scientific name. So when we were then on a US tour, I visited him there and saw this kind of little boat they have, with a camera, and they go out every morning. And go out there in Monterey, let the robot down, and they find every day a new creature. So for me, that was a kind of metaphor for me, myself as a composer, going to the deep of your own world and finding these new patterns and new musical beings there.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. Now, maybe I'm getting a little too deep here, but quantum mechanics tells us that when we observe something, its behavior changes.
Right.
So I'm wondering, on a musical sense, once one has created these stratagems and you're observing them, does your consciousness of, your awareness of this template that you're using, does that then change the very ingredients of it? Do you know
But
what I don't know
yeah,
if I'm
I know
saying
what
it
you mean.
properly.
Also from the
Once you
the
become
aspect-
aware of it while you're observing it, does it shift on you?
Actually, that's what I mean when I'm saying, you know, a composer has also the job to observe his material very precisely. Or we can also say a musician in general, because I have an experience in that. Like when I was playing in my 20s in a quartet with 4 pianos, we played a lot of Gershwin music. Also, were touring with that and made own arrangements. And we started actually from zero quite to big festivals because we had a good promoter who loved that music and the way we were playing, like, you know, interpreting but also improvising over that stuff. And so I had really to train also my presence to go from smaller stages to really big stages, like with 2,000 people in classical halls in a very short amount of time, which meant I kind of created a training camp where I was really learning everything by heart under difficult circumstances.
You're kind of observing yourself.
Yeah,
almost.
with cold hands and stuff. And then I start to dream actually about these motives. And I had a specific dream where I became a certain motive, you know, like I felt like the musical motive was dancing. So the stuff you're kind of referring to, you know, is maybe metaphoric in certain ways, but it also shows our capacity on like really going deep into material that we are working with, and that's for a musician, a composer, an interpreter, an improviser, just a player in general, very important to go in that direction so that it gets deep.
It's very important. We were talking before we came on here, you and I, about Zorn a little bit.
Right.
And I can't remember who said this, but one of the people that he handed some of his work to for the Masada stuff, they said that's the genius of it. There's very little information.
Right. Yeah.
That's an interesting there's like a melody.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can work with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The goal, I mean, I wrote so-called one-page pieces. So sometimes that's a drum beat and a bass line, or a piano line and a drum beat. Usually there is a drum beat that is composed, and, you know, the drum is already an orchestra itself. Then I developed a lot on that Lyria record. We had some like several pages, pieces that were really working. We even did a score for the audience, so there is a score of that record that you can see how this is all composed.
And watch along, follow along.
Yeah, follow along, and also there's a text about how we work. But also there in every piece is one major idea. Like you have it in Debussy etudes or something, there is one idea, or you have it in Bach preludiums, you know, or in certain sonatas. I love this idea that the essence is there, but then also in that modular way, give improvisers the chance to work with it, give different groups the chance to work with it, and, you know, do not treat the composition as a holy cow that should not be touched as a masterpiece. But, you know, it depends on the performers. The performers are also essential when you play a string quartet or a symphony. You know, the performer make it sound. They make it sensual.
Yeah. Well, we've got this band that's going to be doing something at 3 o'clock is just coming in. So we're going to take a little break from our talk. But what we asked Nick to do today is pick out some music that inspired him.
Yeah. And
let's put on some of that while we get the band situated. We're going to come back and talk some more.
Yeah, right.
But
so
first of all, we're playing what track number off this?
Yeah,
Matt?
I think it's the second one. It's a record by Salif Keita called Amen, and the second track is called Waraya. And the record is actually produced by keyboardist and pianist Joe Zawinul, that you might know from Weather Report and you know, Cannibal Adderley, and he's one of the greatest phrasing masters that are playing between the lines. And this track, in relation to African music and Salif Keita's music, shows exactly how they kind of build up these carpets in a modular way. There is a track, there is a piece, there is a clear content with the voice, but there is a lot of kind of interlocking, improvised stuff in there that for us sounds so essentially coherent that I love this album for its groove.
What track number is it again, man?
It was track number 2. Number 2, yeah. I think.
Okay, and what's the name of the track again, man?
That's called Waraya.
Okay, cool. WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM, WZRDChicago.org for streaming around the world anytime, anywhere. We've just been listening to some music that Nick Bartsch picked out. He's in the studio with us. He's at Constellation tonight with his band Ronin at 8:30 sharp. Nick, what did we just hear, and what does that stuff mean to you?
Well, the first track was from the record My Life in the Bush of Ghosts.
First we played the other one.
No, but before Laurie Anderson.
Oh, before Laurie, right, sorry.
Yeah, right. We played from My Life in the Bush of Ghosts by Brian Eno and David Byrne. So very famous record, of course. Everybody almost knows it. But I like it because of a specific reason. I mean, that track especially has a lot of interlocking and groove stuff. But, you know, it's coming from an interesting corner how this groove is worked out and came on a record. So I think this record was so special because we actually don't know what it actually is. You know, is it spiritual music, or is it just groove music? Is it pop music, or is it even experimental music? And we find in specifically,
yes.
right, and specifically in that track, we find something that I call in general ritual groove music. And, you know, usually I call my own music like that, but this is not so much a style than a certain attitude and a certain thinking. So it has a very urban aspect of reacting to phenomena and bringing them into a context. And I think that track, Help Me Somebody, that we heard, you know, brings this kind of very strong religion of the guy who is speaking, this strong energy, and transforms it into an urban kind of sophisticated way, but at the same time being very direct, very rough, very archaic, and very groove oriented, so that we actually don't know exactly the outcome. You know, what energy does it have? Is it dark or white or know, blue, or what is it?
Yeah.
And I think for me it was always a way of presenting music that created a lot of energy and a lot of inspiration, and also showed in maybe a difficult phenomena of this kind of preacher guy, how much energy is in there, and how much of this energy we all need in the groove music also when we do, you know, more sophisticated or abstract or intellectual groove music, which is almost a paradoxon, right? But that I loved very much in this track. It speaks very directly, but it has a deepness, and it opens a lot of questions that I like very much. And then in the you know, second track, that is by Laurie Anderson, I have chosen this because I like specifically that track, but also the whole record called Bright Red. And about 3 years ago, I was asked by a guy in Germany for a festival if I would like to do a cooperation with a singer. And I said, well, you know, I love singers and especially choirs and stuff, but we avoid actually to work with singers in the bands because it has a total different impact then. And I cannot name you now somebody. I had an idea of a younger Swedish singer, female singer that I liked very much, but that was a bit, you know, too specific. And then he asked me, what about Laurie Anderson? Because I know her very well. And then I said, hey man, that's came out of the blue, but it's very, very precise because I love this music. I had all the records. I listened to all that when I was even a teenager, right? And inspired me because what is it? It is kind of spoken word. It's the oral tradition. It's tradition of mixing singing with telling stories. It had always good musicians. You know, the record is also produced by Brian Eno, but you have also great drummer on it like Joey Barron. And I loved this music, so I thought, okay, that's an opportunity. You know, it was like fate in a way. So then we came together, and I wrote Laurie an email and asked if she would do together with me and Eivind Arset, a good friend for me.
The guitarist?
Yeah, the guitarist.
You know him?
Yeah, I know him very well. He's a friend, and I loved his playing. You know, I rarely do projects out of my bands because I want to focus on that. But when we do it, it should have a certain way of connection, right?
Yeah.
So and she listened to my music and about the ideas that we had, and she said, yes, let's do it. So she was invited there, and we did a trio for that festival.
You, Laurie, and Ivan.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it up on YouTube or anything?
Yeah, I think there's a secret recording, but it never, made it to the public, I guess. But the point is that, I think projects have often a good impact and are interesting for the artists and for the audience, but the result is rarely the same like when you have a band that is really a working band. But these performances, and we finally did 3, because she then liked the project very much and invited us to the Brighton Festival, where she was curator in residence and also had other projects. So she wanted to present it again in the Brighton Dome, where we did that in the UK, that project. And we just had a lot of fun and also deep connections in the way we work with music. And there you have it again, this modular way of working together. It's not like improvisation and, you just do something, but your ear really follows what the other is doing, and this kind of working together, what we call in martial arts Awase, what's also the new title of our Ronin record, is like to move together, to exchange the energy and to really be close together, faster than you're thinking, so with your ears. And that brought me together with Laurie, and I had a very inspiring talks also, and it was for me also kind of a dream to meet her and to work on that level of musicianship and philosophical background in music together. So we had a very good time, and I learned a lot also, I must say, which is very important when you're a younger musician, that you can meet some of your heroes and inspiring personalities, that you can go a step forward and also learn something, but also contribute on the same level, to create something together. And so finally, after these experiences that were very fulfilling, very, very interesting, I went back to my whole catalog of, all the records from her, and was listening again to the things I really liked. So I came back especially to that track that inspired me a lot, also through its direct kind of groove and, voice, color and phrasing. That inspired me a lot, together with the content that she's singing, talking.
Man, I did not know about that. This is kind of changing the subject, but you made me think of something when you said there was a secret recording of this.
Yeah.
I know you can't speak for another person, but
Right.
I've always been curious why some records end up on ECM and some don't. Do you have any insight into that, Manfred?
Sure.
Because there are artists that have played on his label,
Yeah.
then they've made another recording.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but it sounds like ECM,
Yeah. Mm.
some of the same artists,
Yeah.
but it's on some other label. What makes Manfred decide?
Well, I cannot speak for him, but my experience with him is that he has a very specific interest. When something is coming on his radar, he once said, "You have to hear the grass growing, like musically. Who is there, who is playing, who is fresh, who brings ideas that fit to the way he thinks and also sees music." Actually, he's not only hearing the music,
Visual.
but he's seeing the music.
Sure.
So when you do a record, then he has usually a very intuitive vision of what's coming together there, and how he can, put it out into the world, and how he said it once, how it creates resonances. When our first record was out, he said, we have now to see what resonances are coming back. So, not in that marketing speech of like, we have to make it in a certain, but just like let it happen.
Like a ripple.
Yeah,
What
and
does
respecting also the listeners out there that are kind of creating their own view on that record, their own perception, their own way, what they link to that record. And he's very good in bringing that into a context and then let it flow. And usually when, at least in my experience, it was like this, when you're dedicated to that and you're also focusing on doing a record really as something special where you worked a lot on and it has a certain, coherence and concept, then he stays with it, respects you very much and contributes in the way that he can as a producer and listener in the studio. Very, very dynamic, very direct, very experienced, but never, like in a teacher way, but very much like open. And I saw him also in a lot of studio sessions being really kind of listening and trying to decide, newly, although he had so much experience. So I think he has a very good intuition why he does something and why not. Very often you cannot explain that with a strategy. It's just like the decision that appears out of his way of listening.
It's an intuition that can't really be talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
And one thing I was very curious about too was you recorded several things on your own label, and then you come to ECM. What did Manfred teach you? I'm more interested, did you teach Manfred anything? Having produced your own records, did you have any...
Well, first of all, I did that before, and I took care of the records I had before to just also have the rights and be sure how they are produced and everything. But
do you have any notes for him on mastering or engineering?
Well, first of all, he listened to these albums, so
right.
He knew them. I gave them to him, and he had a big respect and showed this also. He was very fair, very open, although he had different ideas, of course, of production, because they are produced quite different. Many of it depends on the album, but especially the Ronin tracks are a bit drier, kind of more funk-oriented produced. But not only, we also had a lot of mixes going on that were specifically track by track. So when then we went to the studio, I had several meetings, and I thought we might, prepare that, but we didn't. We talked more about art and classical music a lot. And then we went to the studio, and then I asked him, do you need the scores or whatever? And he said, no, we start and we listen. And we started, and I had several interesting experiences, but the first, maybe two that are specific. Like the first one was that he never interfered in a way that it completely changed everything. He interfered in a very specific way about the dramaturgy of the pieces. So when he heard that a track or a take gets weak at a certain point, he made some subtle suggestions what to change. For example, in one track on Stoa, like 35, we had the little bell that you have there, this tick 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 tick. This one we had also in the more open part at the end, and he said, when it goes through, it makes us a bit kind of too, it makes it too obvious. Can you put that voice into another instrument? So I put it on the Rhodes actually. And this made, and it was in a deeper, octave and so on. Yeah, so okay. That opened things up for like the structures in the upper section of, of the listening space and stuff like this. So it was very subtle and it served the piece actually also from me as a composer. Or a second experience on Hold On, the most actually successful album that brought us really out to the world, because it was the second one on ECM. It was also in the States quite had an attention. And there we had one piece, it was the module, let me see, 4117 was it, that one. So module 4117, like when we recorded that, it felt really long, and it was maybe 17 minutes or so, and it felt like 25 or so. So I said in the mixing session, maybe we have to cut some stuff out that it has a better flow. And then he said, no, let's wait, I mix it. So he mixed it live, like on the board, doing that live, all kind of instruments. So he made like subtle changes that your ear is kind of, seduced to several places in the composition during that. So things are subtly changing all over the place. And finally the piece sounded like 12 minutes instead of 17 minutes, intuitively. So that impressed me very much. These experiences showed just that he has such a huge ear also for the sound. And that's a big difference in the way we worked before. So his kind of open, new, fresh ear as a producer was very important and very interesting to work with as a band, because we produced the records all ourselves, or I did it before. Yeah. And to work with a producer makes really sense in that way, and also, of course, with his experiences and his listening to how he hears something. So, for example, also on Stoa, in 3817 you hear kind of almost a voice somewhere, but there is no voice. It's just a mix, right? So I learned a lot, and one major thing I learned, he said very often when there was a little mistake or something that was incorrect, he said, let it in. Let it there. It belongs to the track, More important is the dramaturgy, the flow, what the band created. So he did not constantly correct things, cut it out, do things, but respect it, that it's live. And we played usually the tracks live, and they have not a lot of takes. Sometimes they're even first takes, although they're so long. And I learned a lot from him to trust our musicianship. That's very important. Trust your musicianship. When you play, your organism, your body plays a lot more than your intellect can analyze. And start to trust that. And he encouraged us a lot, to go for that. And that's really a major thing I learned from him that is very basic and very essential for musicians. Because also in the education, we are taught very often, analyze this, analyze that, but train your musicianship, train your ear like a guy is training in sports,
So
like a guy is doing, like in soccer, like a guy is doing the free kick like 20 times after training, or in baseball, I don't know, in your culture, like, training the hit like several times, all that stuff that we're really doing with our body and our musicianship is essential.
Fantastic. Wow. Let me ask you now, tonight you're going to be performing for the second time in Chicago.
Right.
And we talked in the other interview about how you folks change sets a lot.
Yeah.
And we talked about the importance of Exil. For those of you that don't know, it's a club in Zurich that you part own?
Yeah, I'm a co-founder and co-owner of that club. We were 5 people, like 2 musicians, an architect, and 2 promoters that just wanted to do a club, founded from music lovers for music lovers, and creating there our own space, our own atmosphere, and also having certain freedom of programming in there, independent of styles. It's kind of a post-genre club.
Well, we talked in our interview a couple weeks ago, you and me, about the importance of having a situation like that where you can write some material.
Right.
You can play it for a year.
Right.
Take it out on the road for another year.
Right.
Then record it.
Exactly.
I'm curious, the new Awase album has a composition by Shah.
Yeah.
Did you ask him to write something? Did he say, I want to write something? How did his music become part of Ronin?
Well, Shah is came to Ronin as a very young player, so Ronin started as a trio, went to a quartet, and then with Shaw to a quintet. He came once. He was always coming to the concerts already when he was 18, and he loved that music. Also, the whole scene. He was in the scene in general, and then he wanted to take composition lessons with me. So I said, of course, yes. I'm looking very much forward to that. But then we sat on a table and we talked, and then I realized, hey man, sitting here and talking is not the point. Like, he's a good bass clarinet player. He's working on the saxophone. He will be a great musician. So let's just play together. And on tour, you talk a lot. You're naturally growing into the whole thing. And he was always a very talented and inspiring and also a reliable personality. So we started to play together, and in 2004 we founded this Monday series where we play every Monday, and he was there every Monday, he played every Monday. So he grew up into Ronin very organically, and then also was on the first ECM record. And over the years he stayed, he was very committed, but he also developed his own spirit, his own view on things, and even his own interpretation of that music in general. This is not my invention. It is inspired by many people, and I'm just one of the people who also maybe has a strong individual voice in that. But he had 2 from the very beginning and was composing. He had the bands building up, and then after a few years he found really the way he wanted to play that with his own band called Shah's Feckel, where also Casper is playing on the drums, and where he goes more into a prog direction. He has a guitar in there, and it's a bit more rockish, and they have a different attitude also, and they're very real, very authentic. and they had this A already recorded there. So when we were working on the new program, where I usually develop an idea of a record, not only like pieces, but having an idea how that will be, what that record will say, and what the musical context is. So I thought I asked him if he wanted to contribute a composition. So he made a few suggestions, but there were also more faster tracks with patterns, and I thought this A is such a simple, interesting
it fits
piece.
Right in.
Yeah. So why don't we go for that and give it an Ronin interpretation? So I was talking to him if he agrees on that, if he would love to try that out with Ronin. So and he wanted to and was very inspired by that too. So we tried it out and it fitted very well, and it develops still also as a band. And I think it fits specifically to Ronin because it has a song attitude. You need a song attitude to play that, but you also need that capacity to create a musical mantra, to develop it over always the same, develop it, and like let it spiral itself up. That's a technique that Ronin specifically knows. So with that piece, I thought that works very well, and he too. So I think it's very important that we hear a composition by him. But that's an older one actually that he already had before, and I just loved it. Also played by his band.
Oh, so you'd already heard it? Okay.
Yeah, I heard it there, but there is very different. Also, when I hear it now, I even wanted to have it as a first track on his record, but the second part there is very rockish, so it's more prog rockish then.
Oh, I love the opening module on the album.
So we have
that's the most ECM sounding piece you guys have ever done.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Oh, wait, real quick, I forgot to do my ID at the top of the hour. You are listening to WZRD Chicago. I should have said this at 2:00. 88.3 FM. So you heard the piece before, and we're talking about the first piece. And I said it's like the most ECM sounding thing you've done, kind of. I hate to say ECM sounding, but
yeah, that piece has a history also. I have chosen that piece. It's actually module 60, the opening track on Awase. So I wanted to show that piece also, although it was already on the last record, like a Continuum, the one I did with my acoustic group Mobile.
Yeah.
And on a lot of our records are connections. Even on the old records, I had two records with the same name but backwards, like by Mobile and by Ronin. So to show that this modular way of working with the pieces creates different solutions out of the same material. And so I wanted to show how Ronin plays that 60. So we played actually the whole piece, but then in a way, in the studio, we had our difficulties in the beginning to create an adequate dramaturgy. So Manfred suggested, let's start in the beginning of the piece, in that empty part. And in the beginning, I thought, okay, that's a bit bizarre because, the piece made a certain way and then you understand where it goes. But then we did it and it came out very beautifully. It is like an opening track that, when a film starts.
I was just going to say, man, it's like the opening credits.
Exactly.
That's
it's
exactly
opening credits. Exactly. So you're in there, it gets black, you see the movie and you see the music and you hear it and you can really dive into it. And then boom, the next track
58 is the first scene.
Yeah, exactly. And then 58, you have the major topic on that record, 5 Against 7, in a long development. So that was brilliant.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, man. Let's put on another piece of music.
Yeah.
Let's play something of your choice.
Yeah.
From Bob Marley. We got that coming
that's
up?
a record, a track also from Bob Marley. So I saw that film about Bob Marley, where it's so beautifully and precisely shown how music changes when different communities work on them. So in that film, you see.
What film is this?
Yeah, it's a film about Bob Marley's life. I think it's just called Marley.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
In that film, you see how this Jamaican community, listened to American music from New York, then from New Orleans, and then how they changed it into their own phrasing, their own way of respecting it, because they played this music before as, cover versions, and then they started to kind of individually adapt things to their own way of living, their own community, and finally reggae came out of that. Yeah. And in that film you can study that, and I like that very much, because I'm often talking about communities that are developing their music, out of a language into a dialect and then into a slang, that you even have kind of a neighborhood thing, like we do that also in Zurich. In our neighborhood, I grew up with drummer Casper Rust. In the same neighborhood, we played soccer together, and we played in bands together as kids already. And that kind of, being in the great flow of music without this idea I invented everything, but I'm just a part of and we are a part of that ongoing development, changing of phrases, changing of musical interpretations of communities. But that only works when you work long together and when you have a certain community spirit that, through talking, through dinners together, through rehearsals, but through a lot of playing experience also creates a certain own way of playing together, of an own way of jokes, an own way of irony in the music, and an own way of how you play together.
Well, I love the way you put that, man. You create a language, it becomes a dialect, and then when you're familiar, it becomes a slang.
And so this piece is called Exodus, this track by Bob Marley, and you also hear that this kind of individual way, how they put it, how it is, how the breaks are, the pickups are, how the drums is used, and you have also a lot of interesting...
What track number?
Stuff is track number 13. And I love also the development of the piece and the choirs, and it's kind of a bit similar like the piece by Salif Keita that we heard, but in a very different style.
All right, man, let's check it out.
Yeah.
We're going to be wrapping up our afternoon here with NIK BARTSCH, and this is just a prelude to a NIK BARTSCH Ronin Day here in Chicago, and we end with a celebration of live music tonight at Constellation at 8:30. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more, and then we're going to play a piece by NIK BARTSCH and Ronin, just in case you're tuning in and you're hearing this wonderful conversation, and it's drawing you in, but you've never heard the music, and perhaps you're free tonight, and we can all hang out together at Constellation. Wow. Nick, I want to get back to something you were talking about with working with Shah and his composition A for the new Awase album. I found it really interesting that he wanted to study composition with you. You guys sat down and talked, and you realized, well, this guy can play. Maybe we should just play and talk about what took place rather than this abstract conversation about composition in general. You did your thing and then looked at what you did, right? Kind of, sort of?
Right. I also studied classical piano and had a lot of courses actually in the on modern composition, but for me it was always very important what do we hear live. So the performance actually creates the music, the team, the band, the orchestra finally makes the composition physical. So when we were sitting there, I also thought, okay, when we talk about that, it's very theoretical, and of course he's a very smart guy and he gets things. But, music is so physical, and on stage when a band plays, and that's what we do actually, it's band music, a big part of what I compose. You need to experience it, and then you understand this as a creative person like he is. So actually a lot of composition decisions I make out of the view on who will perform that, how is it performed, who are the musicians, what skills do they have. And I think many composers also do that even in classical music. Of course you have your vision, but it's important that it starts to sound, that you actually include the players, that they that how to cooperate with them, that it finally sounds. May it be the conductor, or the orchestra, or the chamber music ensemble. But in our case, it's clearly a band. So I thought also the band process might be very valuable for him, seeing how a band interacts socially, how a band rehearses, how a piece is developing in the rehearsal, how you respect everybody's view, but how you also bring your idea of the composition through as a composer in a band. That's also sometimes a challenge, right?
Sure.
So I usually say, I have a clear idea of the piece, also how it might sound with the band. But the band might change it, and I'm not angry on that. It can just go a different way, which of course does not mean that I don't have a vision of it. But sometimes the circumstances with the band are that it might be better it develops in a certain direction, that the band really can express the piece in a certain way. So all these processes are actually aesthetically and socially, musically very complex, and you need constantly to find solutions together. You need to find solutions as a leader, but also as a group. You need to find solution as a player. So for example, me as a person, I have many hats on: the composer, the leader, the player. And I wanted also that a guy like Shaw can experience that very directly without too many theoretical backgrounds, but, jump into it and experience it and tour, because you need experience. You need to play, and you need as a player to experience several also difficult situations to finally focus on your music and be able under all certain circumstances to play and to express the music of yourself, but also of a group or of another composer.
And like you said, and I'm sure he finds this with his more progressive band, but it's one thing to compose it and then to see how it breathes and lives live, and it might change.
Exactly, and also afterwards, the talk, like you mentioned that, afterwards is important. So we have a say, like, just after the gig, you don't talk, you don't criticize too much, because you just came out of the game, right? Like in sports, you were on the field and you're coming out and you kind of are somewhere else. But then after a while we talk about it. We have also regular meetings almost every month where we talk things through, technical things, organization details, social things, but also aesthetical things and the way how we work. So these talks are very important to keep the band healthy in terms of the social interaction and the way people see things, also the conflicts we have. Like every band has conflicts. We know that most of the bands, they split because they have conflicts that were not solved, right?
They didn't talk about it.
Yeah, although they maybe have a great, musicianship together, they're a great band, but there are so many things on a human level, on a social level happening also. So these things are very essential, and as a musician, independent if it's a composer, a player, or whatever, you need to experience that and learn from that, and then develop your own view, how you want to do it. Are you more the kind of, hierarchy type? Are you more the guy of like inspiring, or is it a mix? Or how you want to act as a leader, as a composer, as a player, as a colleague in a band? How you want to do that? You need to really develop that view to finally be able also to be clear towards your colleagues and to help and to serve the final performance.
And it's hard when you're friends. Like you and Casper have been friends forever, because like a lot of people in Sun Ra, they love doing it, but they called it the Sun Ra jail. Yeah. Because it was so disciplined.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So do you find it on a personal level a little weird, because you are Are you pretty tight with Shah and Tommy too?
Yeah, of course we are all also friends, but we have serious conflicts, also conflicts that stay, and we try to balance that out constantly. And, I might not put it into like this picture of a jail or a cave, but every action, every group has its advantages and disadvantages. And the moment you learn that you never have everything, but that you're a part and that you're responsible for balancing out all the group energies, all the things that are done, but that you also have the right to have a part of that cake, right? That's very important. So I think we're still working on that, and we will see how far the journey goes, because as we know, everywhere in teams, conflicts can be very strong, and
they can be useful though.
Yeah, too. Also that. But the energy of bringing people together, or bringing the people, separate the people. You find that in every group, and it's a big challenge, and it's a big duty also for the leader, but also for every person in the group to kind of be honest and be part of the solution when there is a conflict.
Do Tommy and or Casper, do they write? Does Tommy or Casper, do they write music?
Oh, yeah, Tommy has a few compositions, but in a very different style. But Casper is not writing music, but he contributes very much in a sense of a very clear drummer in terms of sound density in a piece, also of development in a piece. So
he's got great dynamics. There's so many drummers that are fantastic drummers that don't know how to play soft.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dynamics is one of the major issues. We have the four things. This is phrasing, dynamics, sound, and dramaturgy. These are the four things I always watch in a performance. It's not about when we talk about like making a composition alive. Give it life, then it's not about melody, harmony, and rhythm. It's about phrasing, dynamics, sound, and dramaturgy. These four things you have to sort out in every band. Doesn't matter if it's a string quartet, an orchestra, or a rock band, or whatever it is. It's all about how you phrase together, how you interpret something, how you organize the dynamics. That's a major music issue. The dynamics is essential.
Yeah.
How you organize the sound, how you make the blendings, the shadows of each other, the doublings, the triplings, all of that sort, and how you bring a piece into a dramaturgy that it goes from A to Z in a way that you seduce the listener and that you also, as a band, coming into the flow. So these four things, phrasing, dynamics, sound, and dramaturgy are the essential things how I usually look at the performance.
I'm being distracted because we can hear the other band in the other room. I had something, I just lost it. But I am also curious, when the band plays live,
right?
The improvisational factor of your music specifically, the timbre, timbre of each guy. Shah knows how to mimic piano.
Yeah.
Piano knows how to mimic Casper.
Yeah, right.
Tommy knows how to mimic everybody.
Yeah. Right.
Is the timbre at all part of the improvisation?
Yeah, exactly. That's this.
Like, I'm playing with a different color tonight.
Right. It's about sound and mixing and the whole thing, how you put your voice as an ingredient into the whole, right? And these blendings and all of that stuff we do, we take a lot care about that, also in rehearsals, but also live. So this idea of, having a chamber ensemble kind of, and working on every detail of blendings and togetherness, and so that's essential. But as you said, live, it's every time different. You have every time different space, you have different circumstances. So we need to adapt with our ears.
It's probably different from Monday to Monday, even though it's the same sound system. I'm talking about your club, Exil.
Exactly, yeah.
Same sound system.
Yeah, we had once that in the very beginning the idea, hey, let's make this simpler. You have just one setting in the mixing desk and that's cool. So every time you press a knob and then it works. It's not true. It's every time different. You have different people in there. You have a little different corner maybe with the piano and stuff. And that's why we, for example, also travel with sound engineer and light engineer always, because, they need to take care about these details. They know it. They're both musicians. They know exactly what we do. They help us in the space. Yeah. Light technician also is a bass player. He knows very well how everything works and how he can react on the different cycles and complex
meters. Is he improving at all?
Yeah.
Is the light guy improving with you, or
is
he set?
He's partly also working with the setting he finds and how he installs everything. So he has also freedom in several parts. Yeah.
Fantastic. I really hope you folks are enjoying this interview. It's very rare that people get to sit down and just talk. There's commercials. There's time restrictions.
Right.
So we hope that you really are appreciating freeform radio here at WZRD.
Yeah, great pleasure to have the possibility to talk and, also go to the essential things that actually we all share as musicians, right?
Absolutely. Well, listen, you're going to be playing tonight. I'd like to play something to end this from the new album. It's up to you what we play, which track. It can be something you're going to play tonight, which I'd kind of prefer. But if you'd rather pick a track...
I suggest the 36 because, that's on one hand a new track since we played new, but it's an old one that shows actually the development of the band also, and it has the wide variety, the range that we use in dynamics, in development, and also where a piece starts and where it ends. So, it's a bit like when you start with stretching and stuff, and then you drink a good green tea, and then you start to run or to cycle or to go on a dance trip, whatever you do, and then you move and you get more into that movement energy, that kinetic kind of flow that also brings us so much in connection with the whole world and with our friends and everything. And then you go there and then you just in a way, be part of the whole. That's actually what this piece in its whole development shows. It's kind of a positive, voodoo clockwork that is going on here. And I would like to present that piece. I'm very happy that I could be here. Thanks a lot, Brian, and looking forward to the performance tonight also to share that music with the Chicago audience.
Absolutely. And by the way, dancing is encouraged. It does not have to be a deadly serious atmosphere.
Exactly.
All right, Module 36 coming up now from the most recent Ronin release on the esteemed ECM label. And this is Module 36.